I'm very humbled to be here, and especially following that incredible, inspiring story that we just heard. But humility is not what we need right now. We need action. We need bold action. And it's time that we came together in the trade union movement to create some of that intensity that we once had. We once had the fight. We need to bring that back. We need to bring that back. It's been too long that the corporate masters have had control. They've taken control away from our union movement. They've co-opted our union movement. Many of our union leaders, so-called leaders, now work side by side with the company more than they do with the workers on the plant floor. The corporatism that we're facing today is capitalism on steroids.
That's right. That's right.
NAFTA was an agreement, it's not a trade agreement. It's an agreement to give corporations power, immense power, more power than they've ever had in the history of the world. It gives them the power greater than the elected governments of the people. It gives them the power to pit workers against one another across borders. NAFTA and CAFTA and the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the World Trade Organization, they're all organized to break down the borders, the barriers to capitalism, to trade for the global corporations, so that they can increase their profits to immeasurable levels. At the same time, we're erecting borders to one another. We're putting up borders between us, between our countries, between the workers that actually provide the profits that these corporations are sucking out of us. These trade agreements have been horrendous for workers in all the countries that they come across. NAFTA has been difficult for workers in all the countries. It's also been disastrous for our communities. When a corporation pulls up that's been there for decades. For instance, in Chicago, the Nabisco Corporation, been there for 100 years making cookies. Mondelez bought that company and moved the production, half of the production from that factory to Mexico. Instead of making cookies in Mexico and in Chicago, making the cookies in Mexico and giving a wage where the Mexican workers can afford to buy those cookies, no, they pull the jobs out of Chicago and put them down to Mexico, and pitting the workers against one another across the borders. So that cripples our communities. It cripples the base of us to be able to work together. It also, NAFTA and these other trade agreements have destroyed our environments. When a company can sue a country because their environmental laws are too strict, and take our taxpayer dollars in exchange for that lawsuit, and it's not even in our courts. It's in an international tribunal. And you know, their power comes from their money, and as they accumulate more money, that money then in turn gets used to create more power. They buy politicians. And if they can't buy the politicians, they go and buy the people that are put on the boards to oversee them. They buy the people that are overseeing the Food and Drug Administration. They buy the people that are overseeing the EPA.
That's right. That's right.
So how do we combat that? For me personally, I see that what we need in this world is not a minimum wage. We need a maximum wage.
That's right. That's right.
When people make too much money, they do bad things with it.
That's right.
They take that money and they use it to corrupt the system so that they can get more money. And it's a never-ending cycle. So we need to put a cap on the wages that corporations and the ultra-rich can steal from us. Those gains ultimately come from the work of us. So in order to do that, we're going to have to organize. We're going to have to organize globally. The corporations have beat us to the punch on this a long time ago. We're well behind on this organizing effort. But we've caught up before. You know, the labor movement in the 1930s knew how to get things done. The workers fought. But we're going to have to retake our own organizations first before we can fight the global fight. In the UAW, we've seen instances just recently, just this last year, where the vice president that was in charge of negotiations with Fiat Chrysler was on the tape. He was working with the head of labor relations at Fiat Chrysler to take money out of the joint program funds that were supposed to be training workers. They were taking the money and putting it in their pocket, buying houses, buying condos, going on nice vacations, buying $37,000 pens.
Rotten bastards.
So we need to get the corruption out of our unions in order to take this fight on. And that means we need to organize the rank and file.
Woo! Yes! Yes!
So we can't give up on the fight, and we have to keep fighting. But let me tell you something. This fight is not something that we can look at as something that we can win. We're not going to ever have an ultimate win. We might win the battle here, we might win a battle there, but the corporations and the greedy people are always going to be coming back for more. So we cannot let up.
That's right.
So we need to understand that no victory is permanent. Every victory is temporary. Organizing cannot end. Once we win, we have to fight some more. We have to maintain our gains. So the fight for social and economic justice goes on, and that's why we started in October at a conference much like this in Chicago. We started what's known as the Workers' Solidarity Action Network.
Woo! Yeah.
This is a mechanism for us to be able to talk to one another all around the country and get our stories out there. The powerful story that we just heard from our sister from Mexico, from right across the border from Texas. That powerful story isn't getting out there. It will now. It will now, brothers and sisters, it will now. So I want everyone that's here, if you haven't done it already, the Workers' Solidarity Action Network has a Facebook page and a Facebook group. Like the page and join the group. We're working on a website. And through these mechanisms, we'll be able to share our stories and come to the aid of workers when workers are in struggle. That's the only way that we're ever going to win this battle, is by coming together as workers. So with that, I'll conclude my statements, and I want to thank you very much for inviting us here. The fight goes on.